What's happening in motorsport? For the week of March the 3rd, 2025, let's recap a very busy week of motorsport action in a video I made on a whim. We will get into F1 in just a moment, but 3 championships had their first race weekend of the season, this weekend just gone, so let's get into those first. Starting off with WEC. The World Endurance Championship is back for the catchily titled 1,812 kilometers of Qatar at the Losail circuit in, well, Qatar. And it was a Ferrari 1-2-3. Only the second time that's ever happened in hypercar in WEC. Absolutely perfect result for the team. It was the number 50. That's the Antonio Fuoco, Nick Nelson, Miguel Molina car that came home first, despite a spin after being hit by Robin Freins in the BMW earlier in the race. There was a big challenge from the number 83 Ferrari. That's the third car, the yellow one, the unofficial one, with Robert Kubica, Ye Yifei, and Phil Hansen. That car just held on for second ahead of the other official AF course car of Collado, Giovinazzi and Pierre Guidi. All 3 cars separated by barely 3 seconds as they crossed the line in hypercar. The number 15 BMW of Kevin Magnussen and others came home 4th, so a good debut for K-Mag in WEC. It was a nightmare start, however, for Aston Martin and their new Valkyrie hypercar. The 007 conked out at half distance with a gearbox problem, and the 009 finished in 17th place, several laps down, after a myriad of issues, including one of its doors flying off mid-race. Bit of a random. Elsewhere in hypercar, Jenson Button in the number 38 Jota Cadillac, hit up the back by the sister Jota of Alex Lynn. An absolute nightmare for teammates. Both cars still finished, but the Button Bamba Bourdais car finished about 10 laps down because of some lengthy repairs, understandably. GT3 was won by the number 33 TF Sport Corvette. Daniel Juncadella coming over the line about half a second ahead of Gregoire Saucy in the United Autosports McLaren. That's 10 hours of action condensed into about 14 minutes. Go check out the highlights on the WEC YouTube channel, highly recommend it. Looks like it's going to be an amazing year, especially for hypercars. IndyCar kicked off in St. Petersburg. Reigning champ Alex Palou won the race from Scott Dixon. A late charge from Joseph Newgarden was halted. He was running second and looked like he might have a charge for the win, but ultimately ran out of fuel and just held on for 3rd place. There was an uncharacteristic mistake from Will Power on the opening lap. He crashed out, went straight into the back of Nolan Siegel. Rookie Louis Foster also caught up there. Several cars taken out on lap 1. IndyCar have also got a 14-minute highlight package, and I must say, a debut race to remember for a couple of friends of mine, Will Buxton and James Hinchcliffe, forming part of the Fox Sports Super Team alongside Townsend Bell. Congratulations, chaps, on a great first race weekend. Another Super Team, the Formula 2 Super Team, aka Prema Power Team, didn't fare quite so well. That's Callum Ilott and Robert Schwartzman in the Prema debut race weekend in IndyCar. They had a more low-key debut, finished down in 19th and 20th respectively, so some teething issues for them. Maybe they can pick up some pace later in the year. In the feeder series, another member of F2 royalty, Dennis Hauger, took a destructive win in Indy NXT. He was in complete control in what was a fairly chaotic race, lots of cars in the wall, but Dennis Hauger taking the win as a rookie. Caio Collet down in P3 as well for the F2 flavour to continue. MotoGP also kicked off this week. Usually start the season in Qatar, but obviously WEC were there this weekend, so it's off to Buriram for the Thai Grand Prix, where it was Marc Marquez who took the top step of the podium for Ducati for the first time as a factory Ducati rider. Not only that, but it was a Marquez family 1-2. Alex crossing the line second behind Big Brother, not only in the Grand Prix, but in the sprint as well. Pecco Bagnaia also finishing 3rd in both the sprint and the Grand Prix. Pole, Grand Prix victory and sprint victory for Marc Marquez means perfect score. Could be a championship challenge, who knows, very early to tell yet, but let's see how this one develops. Staying in the Arabian Peninsula, F1 was in Bahrain for 3 days for pre-season testing, the one we were all here for. We got our first glimpse of the pecking order. We also got our first glimpse of the cars properly this year, because the ones we saw at F1 75 Live were sort of show cars with liveries, but they still look good. The upshot is Mercedes look good, Ferrari look good, they look to be about on an even keel. McLaren look very good. They look to be runaway leaders at the moment. Red Bull, as for them, we don't really know where they stand. They completed the fewest laps of anyone, just 304 laps on the board. They had a few reliability issues, some water pressure issues, a couple of spins for each driver, and they were doing a lot of aero testing, especially on the last day. Red Bull do look like they're still in that top 4 group, but they look like, well, they may have a few issues. We don't know. We don't know anything. We'll find out in Australia. Who's behind the leading 4 teams? Apparently, it's Williams. Carlos Sainz landing on his feet. He set the fastest time of the entire test, 1:29.348. Testing times don't always mean that much, but the race pace looked very good as well. The car looks pretty solid all round, so they may be best of the rest contenders. The bottom 5 teams kind of look all together, except for Sauber, who look like they may be stuck in 10th place again as they were last year, kind of just treading water until they become Audi in 2026. Nico Hülkenberg described the car as not great. Testing was a bit chaotic. There were a few red flags, although all of them were for complete nonsense. On the first day there was a power cut and all the lights went out. They had to delay the session and add an extra hour on at the end so that people could complete their running. Day 3 saw 2 red flags. Firstly, a pane of glass fell out of the starter's gantry and smashed on the grid, which is not what you want. And then a bus somehow found itself in the runoff area at turn 10. It's a very tricky corner, lots of cars go off there, so you don't really want a huge 5-ton bus driving around, so they red flagged it for that as well. Other than that, it was very smooth. Basically no teams had mechanical issues, no one really broke down. The only real thing was a piece of Ollie Behrman's engine cover decided to sort of suck itself off the car. That actually happened to Haas at their shakedown at Silverstone with Esteban Ocon driving, so maybe need to build some thicker engine covers. But other than that, yeah, very straightforward test. Mercedes had the most laps, 458, 1 more lap than Haas, 457, and Racing Bulls had 454, so a lot of laps on the board. F1's feeder categories have also been testing in this last week. F3 was the week before, so I won't focus too much on that, but I will mention that Noel Leon, whose name is palindrome, reads the same backwards as it does forwards, Nikola Solov and Callum Voisin were fastest on days 1, 2 and 3 respectively. They have a new car in F3 this year, so hard to tell who's anywhere because everyone's still just learning the new machinery. So keep an eye on Australia in a couple of weeks where the season starts, because that's the first time we'll really get a sense of who's looking fast in F3. I hardly caught up with F3 at all last year, so a lot of the names are a bit alien to me, so I need to recap. F3's big brother F2 was testing in Barcelona. That's where F3 was as well. Arvid Lindblad was quickest on day 1 for Campos. Now pay attention to him, he is going to be in the frame. Red Bull really want him in one of their cars. He's probably going to be a title contender this year in F2. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the Racing Bull seat at some point this year. So keep your eyes peeled for him. He's gonna be on the radar soon. Then on day 2, Gabriele Mini was fastest in the pink Prema. Prema have 2 different liveries this year. Mini is with Alpine, so he's sponsored by BWT. That means his Prema is bright pink. The other Prema of Sebastian Montoya is the standard red and white, so quite easy to tell those 2 apart. The final day was topped by Sami Megatuna for Trident. Trident have been very fast the last few years. They seem to have good pace this year. Much like F3, all the cars are the same. It's still a new car. Last season was the first season of the new 2024 Dallara, so still teams are sort of getting used to it because last year was quite chaotic. If you followed the season, you will know. So again, I wouldn't put too much stock in testing until the first day in Australia. However, being fastest is never a bad thing, especially when the cars are the same. So take it with a grain of salt, but also keep an eye out. And finally, to round things off, first road course race of the year in NASCAR over in Texas. Circuit of the Americas played host. Christopher Bell took back-to-back wins for the first time in his career. William Byron finished P2. He's now the points leader, so he's leading the championship at the moment. Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch completed the top 5. Shane van Gisbergen, the road course expert, of course, formerly of Supercars fame, he looked like he might challenge for the win, but he dropped back, faded to P6. So there's your roundup of all the major motorsports races and events this last week. And that's it.